Well, let's talk about Ricky Starks. Ricky Starks was in the news. A lot has happened since he made that surprise appearance at the GCW show last Saturday. They were at the American Dream Mall in New Jersey. GCW ran a mall show, which I thought looked great. Just the aesthetics of it looked great. Starks came out on that show. He cut a promo. He got people talking because Full Gear was also being held in New Jersey later that same day. And Ricky was backstage at Full Gear. He did not appear on camera. Ricky Starks has not appeared on camera at all in AEW since March. Even though he's been healthy and he's been ready to get back to work, Tony Khan has benched this man for reasons only Tony Khan can speak to, and he's not speaking about it. Even when he was asked in the post-show scrum about Ricky's status and the status of Kenny Omega, you could see the mood change on his face from when he was asked about Ricky Starks to when he was asked about Kenny Omega and heard his name mentioned. And he was able to completely avoid the question by focusing more on Kenny than Ricky. But then on Monday, Chris Van Vliet dropped a brand new interview in studio, over an hour long, with Ricky Starks. And he opened up about a bunch of different topics. And on what he's been up to, he said, I've been home. I've been healthy. Never was injured. I did have a stinger from the match with Top Flight. He got a stinger. That was back in March. I got immediately checked out and everything was fine, but I was just concerned at the time. So that happened, and then I was just home. It's kind of a mind fuck because I'm in my prime, and it sucks when you're on such momentum, riding the wave, doing stuff, and then to just be at home for so long, you're kind of like, whoa. It kind of throws it off. You could tell he's a big Cody Rhodes fan with the whoa. When asked why Tony Khan would sign off on letting him wrestle elsewhere, like in GCW, for example, and not utilize him in AEW, Starks said that he would love to know the answer to that question himself. He said, beats me. I could have 1,000 theories about what's really going on. The fact of the matter is that if I don't have a definitive answer, I can't just make up an answer for people and just assume. Would I love to know the exact reason? For sure. Do I have speculations about why? Absolutely. But that does nothing to speak on things that I speculate. It does nothing for the situation. Obviously, I would love to give a definitive answer. I have no clue. So I already know this is going to go up in flames too, but yeah, I love the fact that the fans still care. All I know is this, regardless, I'm always going to end up better than my situation. I'm always going to end up better than the circumstances that I am currently in. That's just how it works for me. I can't lose. Ricky was very diplomatic in that interview, and he may not want to speculate, and he's probably better off not doing so publicly because it won't help his cause. But I'll be happy to speculate for him, since Tony Khan doesn't want to give anybody any answers. Tony Khan does not want to use Ricky Starks and devote television time to a man that he believes is leaving for WWE when his contract is up. That is ultimately what this all boils down to. Ricky is friends with Cody Rhodes, who left Tony Khan. Ricky is friends with Jade Cargill, who left Tony Khan. And Tony was annoyed by that one because he asked Jade what she wanted. What is it going to take to get you to stay? And she told him. She threw out whatever the dollar amount was, and he was willing to give it to her. And she still left because clearly she had made up her mind already about leaving. It certainly wasn't because WWE was offering her an easier schedule and more time with her daughter than AEW would have. She was working one fucking day a week in AEW. So she left. Those are two of Ricky's very good friends, and I'm sure that he has other friends who work there as well that could put in a good word for him. Tony knows this. Now, he may have been upset by the leaked security camera footage of Starks entering the stadium with Cody for the Royal Rumble last year. Although Ricky was on television last year into the beginning of this year, so if he was upset by that, he wasn't too upset by that, because that was last year's Royal Rumble. But Ricky also addressed that in the interview as well, and he said that somebody who worked at the Alamo Dome decided to take a screenshot of that security camera footage and leak it. And then it blew up online. He says that he had one AEW talent ask him, "Were you at the Rumble last night?" And he said, "Yeah, what the fuck about it?" And this person goes, "I'm just saying, that's a bad look." So who do you think it was? My money's on Jericho or Dax, if I had to venture a guess. But it just reminds me, I think back to when Robbie of the Highlanders, you remember this? There was a tag team in WWE called the Highlanders. And Robbie was shown in the crowd at a TNA show. And they even identified him. I mean, they did this man dirty. They not only put him on camera, and the way that he was sitting there, like he didn't have his hand over his face, but he clearly was uncomfortable and didn't want to be shown. Not only did they put him on camera, they even identified him on screen by his real name and said he was a WWE wrestler. And he got fired not long after that. It wasn't immediate, but he did get fired. And by the way, fuck TNA for that. That was a shitty move on their part. I know it's a different administration now, but fuck them anyway. Stuff like that is just real scummy. But he at least had to know by sitting in the audience that they might put him on TV, and he knew how his boss would probably react to that. I think it was Johnny Ace who was the one who ended up, once he found out, he ended up getting rid of him. This was Ricky Starks visiting backstage, off camera to support his friend. Same at WrestleMania this year when Cody won the title. He was up in one of the suites. You know who else was up there in one of the suites with him? Dustin Rhodes and QT Marshall, who also happened to work for AEW. Even Aaron Solo was there. He was just on the Full Gear pre-show last weekend. Him and QT, both. Ricky said that Tony Khan had already told him it was okay to go beforehand. And then he said in the interview, well, now did he really mean that? Was Tony really okay with that? That he doesn't know. But he was told it was okay. He doesn't see an issue with any of this, and neither do I. Because you do wonder if things like that have played a role in Tony Khan not wanting to use him. All we can do is speculate. Because Tony refuses to explain why this man is not being used. In August, Sports Illustrated asked Tony Khan ahead of All In for an update on Ricky Starks. And Tony went on about how great of a star he is and how he's been a champion here and he's had great matches here. He's under contract and he's well regarded in AEW. He's such a great talent and he's so well regarded that they refuse to use him even though he's under contract with them. And I'm sure they're paying him good money. He was a very visible performer on their shows. He was one half of the AEW World Tag Team Champions. He was in the ring wrestling Sting. He worked with CM Punk last year. He worked with Bryan Danielson last year. This isn't some low-level name who only wrestles on Rampage. And then he just vanished. So it's only logical that fans are going to have questions. There's nothing wrong with that. What's not logical is that Ricky Starks doesn't even know why he's not being used. It's one thing if you or me don't know. We don't work there. We don't have a pipeline to Tony Khan. And if he doesn't want to tell us, he doesn't have to tell us. Ricky Starks works for AEW. He gets a paycheck from Tony Khan. Even he does not know why he is not being used. There is clearly a lack of communication skills in this company that starts at the very top. This is not the first time that we've heard about something like this. I was talking about there being a lack of communication going back to the CM Punk Hangman Page stuff 2 years ago before it exploded out in the open at Brawl Out. Had there been better communication between all parties involved in the spring that year, what we saw later on that summer might never have happened. And think about this. If that never happens, AEW looks like a very different place right now. And CM Punk is not tagging with Roman Reigns in War Games last night. There's no communication there. People are left hanging. They're wondering what the hell is going on. Maybe Tony doesn't like confrontation. Maybe he's more comfortable letting people sit home and have their contracts expire than actually engaging with them. Sean Ross Sapp is now reporting that AEW had an option year on Ricky, that his contract was set to expire in the spring, and they chose to exercise that option to extend his deal into the spring or summer of 2025. Starks was said to be eager to test the free agent market before the option got picked up. So like Josh Alexander in TNA earlier this year, where he wanted to test out free agency, they rolled him over for another year. The difference is TNA actually used Josh Alexander. TNA has not had Josh Alexander sitting on the sidelines paying him to do nothing for the past year. Tony Khan picked up the option on Ricky Starks and has not used him a single time since. That's like going to the store and buying something. You're going to spend all this money on something, It still has the tags on it. You put it away in the closet, you never even use it. Why would you do that? It's a waste of money. That's what's so fucked up about the whole situation. He's like a handbag that Tony bought at the store. It's still wrapped in plastic. He still has the receipt. The tag is on it, and he just kind of puts it in the closet and forgets about it. Rey Fenix is in a similar boat. With Penta and Fenix, from everything that I've read, they weren't shy, or Penta wasn't, about letting people know about their intention to leave and go to WWE. They probably had an open invitation. They probably would be on TV right now, possibly in the spot that the Motor City Machine Guns are in on SmackDown. But they got a little chatty. That got back to Tony Khan, and he squashed it. Penta is now a free agent, according to Fightful. As of this morning, he is now a free agent. He is free to sign with whoever he wants. I don't know if he wants to sign anywhere yet until his brother is free, or if WWE would be interested in bringing him in as a solo act. I would. I'd snatch him up right now. The same can't be said for his brother, who is under contract with AEW through at least a good chunk of 2025, because they tacked on injury time for the time that he missed. He was out hurt. Tony Khan has put him on ice, but no plans to actually use him. Again, we've heard WWE doing stuff like this as well. We're going to add on injury time. But it's not like they add on injury time and then they don't do anything with you. He's just apparently not planning on using these guys. I guess time will tell. Maybe Rey Fenix will suddenly pop up on television in a month, but it looks very unlikely. It just defies all logic to me that you would add time to somebody's contract, roll them over for another year, whatever it is. You know, we're not talking about them just having a little bit of time left on their existing deal. They are actively adding time to their contracts with absolutely no intention of doing anything with these people, which means that they are being paid to sit at home. Now, to play devil's advocate, you could say, well, Tony could always use them by jobbing them out on television and lowering their value elsewhere. That's true. But instead, he would rather pay them to do nothing out of sheer pettiness. I mean, shit, give them the option of buying themselves out of their contracts. If they want to leave so badly, let's say they are just dying to get out of their deals, right? I know Tony comes from a billionaire family. In the grand scheme of things, it's not even about the money. The money doesn't mean anything to him. I mean, he's got no problem dropping cash to get the rights to Final Countdown and November Rain. I mean, he doesn't give a shit. But at least this way, he would be able to recoup some of that money. And if Ricky Starks or if Rey Fenix or somebody else wanted out so badly, and he's not going to use them, but they want out so they can go work for WWE, let's say, they would have to buy their way out. That's what the British Bulldog did after the Montreal Screwjob. He paid Vince McMahon $100,000 to get out of his contract so that he could go to WCW, which turned out to be the biggest mistake of his life. I don't know that Starks or Phoenix would take him up on it, but that would be a pretty shrewd move on Tony's part. All right, let me claw back some of this money that I'm paying them that I'm not getting a return on my investment for. But to hear Ricky talk about it, he hasn't even spoken to Tony Khan. He hasn't had any kind of meaningful dialogue with his boss in 7 months. I mean, how does that even happen? Then I see Paul Walter Hauser, who was on the pre-show panel last weekend at Full Gear, right? Golden Globe Award winner. He's the one who was on Dynamite last year when he got beat up and Jay Lethal stole his Golden Globe. He's a big wrestling fan. He replied to a tweet about Tony Khan extending Starks and Phoenix's contracts and said this. He said, "You know what Tony Khan has never done? Purposely embarrass his talents and put them through constant humiliation rituals for his own entertainment. You know who did? Vince McMahon, for like 35 years. That's an amazing answer, because while that's true and Vince McMahon can fuck off for that, it's amazing how he completely deflected away from a perfectly valid criticism. How does Vince McMahon being an asshole for 35 years excuse Tony Khan from extending someone's contract and not using them? Oh, yeah, but so-and-so did this. That's the lowest form of debate. Like, I shouldn't have to explain to a 38-year-old adult that just because someone did something worse, that doesn't excuse someone else's shitty behavior. But this goes to what I was talking about last week about the AEW sickos who turn everything into a comparison to WWE. This is a constant thing with them. I could do that too, right? Tony Khan has done a lot of positive things. He employed a lot of people during the pandemic at a time when WWE laid off hundreds of their own. I mean, I could cite all the nice things that Tony Khan has ever done, but it has nothing to do with what we are talking about here. You could acknowledge those things. Everything I just said could be true about Vince and Tony, but it doesn't change what we are talking about here. But that's all they have, is to throw out arguments like that. But that's not even the end of it, because Starks was supposed to make 3 appearances for GCW. December 14th in a match against Matt Cardona, December 28th in Seattle, and January 19th at their Hammerstein Ballroom show. He has since been pulled from those dates, not because of anything Ricky said in the interview with Chris, but because GCW star Effie on his podcast had some very unflattering things to say about Tony Khan, but he made it personal. This seems to be the part of what Effie said here that crossed the line with them. He was talking in this portion of his podcast in regards to AEW running 3 dates in the Hammerstein Ballroom later this month. They're going to be doing Live Collision and a Dynamite taping, but they're going to open, it's a Friday thing, so basically Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The Friday show is Final Battle for Ring of Honor, and then Saturday is a Live Collision. Sunday the 22nd, I believe it is a Dynamite taping that will air on Christmas Day. So they're running a little residency at the Hammerstein Ballroom, and this was announced after GCW had already locked in their January 19th date for the Hammerstein Ballroom. So that's what this is in reference here to what Effie was talking about. Brett Lauderdale, the owner of GCW, he just commented about this last week. I talked about it on the podcast. He was trying to be nice about it, but he was clearly bothered by AEW breaking some sort of unwritten rule of wrestling etiquette that you don't run the same venue within 30 days or 60 days of another promotion doing the same. Right? Sometimes it's actually written into the agreements with the venues, like an exclusivity clause that no other promotion can run the venue within a certain period of time. Lauderdale was free to add such a clause to his agreement. He chose not to do so he can vent all he wants to. Tony Khan is under no obligation to check with him first. Anyway, Effie said this about AEW. Y'all have no buzz, no draw, and we've been riding the lightning on having to actually run a profitable company for the past few years to continue existing. We do not have as much backup. I'll put it this way. GCW can't run on a $40 million deficit and continue to run shows, but some of us have the privilege of being able to run at a $40 million deficit. Brett does not own a football team. Brett does not have a dad who pays him to stay away. I don't want this to be a personal thing, but hey guys, you're not the only game in town. It's fine. I can't stop you from running venues, but in my line of work, when TNA Impact wanted to run center stage, GCW a month before and a month after were told that we could not have those dates that we had secured before because it was competing with something that they were doing. And now it just seems the game and the respect never goes both ways. And that's fine. We're not mad. Our people will be there. Our show will be great. We will show it out. But it isn't fun to see that like we're so out of ideas right now that the timing is that conspicuous to you showing up and doing that immediately after we announce that we're doing that. What seemed to bother Tony Khan was the claim that his dad is paying him to stay away from the Jaguars or his other businesses. I wouldn't be surprised if that $40 million deficit crack did it. That seems awfully specific, like something Tony didn't want out there. And so he pulled Ricky Starks from all future GCW shows. Not only Ricky Starks, all AEW talent are said to be barred going forward from working GCW shows. Bloodsport. Bloodsport is an offshoot of GCW. Those are technically GCW shows. Only 48 hours before all of this, Marina Shafir and MVP were working the GCW show. Even Jon Moxley, the AEW World Champion, who just headlined Full Gear, he made an appearance in Marina Shafir's corner on that show. I would think that that ban would include Bloodsport as well. That may be the last time you see Jon Moxley in GCW. Brett Lauderdale, in response to all of this, had this to say on the GCW podcast. I don't get to regularly tune into Effie's podcast, so I wasn't really aware of anything that would be considered too controversial that he would have said. And you know, what Effie says is Effie's opinion, and Effie is an independent wrestler. He's an independent contractor. He says this stuff on his own personal podcast, which is not endorsed or promoted or amplified or platformed by GCW. He's his own guy. I don't review what he does. I have no control over Effie. He is absolutely independent 100%. Ricky Starks has worked for GCW before, so he's no stranger. We know him, and we had a little bit of a relationship. And he's also pretty tight friends with a few of the people in our locker room. He, like many others, reached out to us and asked if we would be interested, and of course, we would love to have a guy like Ricky Starks. We know how talented he is, and we know how popular he is. His promo and his appearance could have easily led to good business in many different directions. So I think it was a big opportunity and a big opportunity seized, and up until a couple of hours ago, it looked like we were on the right track. Theoretically, an independent contractor is independent. They can go and work wherever they want. But in wrestling, these independent contractors don't seem to be very independent. They're at the whim of an employer, which sure makes it seem like they are an employee. I don't know, it's above our pay grade. I'm just an indie wrestling company, and I don't have people under contract. I don't really have a line of communication with AEW. I've never talked to Tony Khan on the phone or via text in my entire life. They don't talk to me. I'm not trying to say that necessarily in a negative context, but I guess we've never really had to talk. I haven't been on the phone, he says, with AEW where they've given me an explanation or asked me any questions or anything. I have no communication with AEW over this. I don't know where it goes beyond Ricky Starks. I've heard things in many different directions, but again, without me hearing it directly from them, it's hard to tell what's real and what's not. I've always considered GCW and AEW to be on the same team, so I don't know if this is meant to punish Ricky Starks. Is it meant to punish GCW? Is it somewhere in between? I just don't know, because again, I don't have that line of communication. There's that word again, by the way. How many times do I have to say it? It's all about communication. So it all sounds very petty, but when you bring family into it, I mean, you have to know that you're taking a risk there. It's one thing to criticize Tony for his booking or for the way he uses certain talent, for creative, whatever it may be. Effie made it personal, and it blew up in GCW's face, unfortunately. And it sucks because this affects a whole lot of people now, not just Ricky Starks. Although Ricky is still allowed to take bookings elsewhere, just not with GCW. Which is important to point out because at first some people thought that this was retaliation for comments that he made on Chris's podcast, and it was kind of their way of punishing Ricky Starks. That does not appear to be the case. Although in a way it does punish Ricky because that's 3 dates he was booked for that he's no longer going to be paid for.